Let's talk about the Satan and demons in the story of the Bible. So let's start in the beginning.
All right.
In Genesis 1, God creates a beautiful, ordered reality out of darkness and disorder so that life can flourish. He appoints humans as his representatives to rule over all of it, and 7 times God calls it good.
Yeah, I experience that kind of goodness often in the world, in things like beauty and truth, love and generosity.
But in Genesis 3, we meet a creature who's in a state of rebellion against his creator. We're not told yet why or how he rebels, but he's on a mission to ruin God's good world for other creatures.
This thing is trouble.
This creature is the Bible's first portrait of evil. It distorts what God has purposed for good, ruining and dragging creation back into darkness and disorder.
So the humans join the spiritual rebel, which leads them back into chaos and death.
And from this point on, the human rebellion is interwoven with a spiritual rebellion. And the biblical story shows how this happens over and over again.
Okay, but wait, we're getting all this from a slithering snake?
Well, there are clues in the story that it's more than just a snake. Remember, Eden is a high place where the earth and its creatures overlap with heaven and its creatures.
So the snake could be a spiritual being.
Well, Genesis 3 points in that direction, and then later biblical authors fill in the picture. Like when the prophet Isaiah has a vision of God's heavenly throne room, he's surrounded and being praised by the spiritual beings.
Yeah, these are the cherubim around God's throne.
But when Isaiah sees these creatures, he describes them as seraphim, which in Hebrew means snake.
So the snake is like a former staff member in God's throne room. So why is he talking to the humans?
Well, the prophet Ezekiel understood this figure as a spiritual rebel who didn't want to live under God's wisdom and authority. He wanted to be God.
All right, that's the same temptation the snake puts before
And by
Adam.
the way, all right, they're only going by the New King James Version Bible. You have to realize that it was the English King James who was the person that commissioned translators to take the holy books, which many of were left out of the New King James Version, to develop what we know of as the Bible. So, I mean, what ended up happening is that God, or the Creator, banished the Lucifer and 21 other entities that followed Lucifer.
Exactly. He says they could rule the world like God, but by their own wisdom.
So they're all kicked out of the garden.
Yeah, God says this rebel will now crawl on its belly.
Where does it go after this?
Well, the biblical authors offer subtle clues where this being is at work behind the scenes, animating division and hatred between humans. They also use a variety of images to describe this being. It's a snake, or a sea dragon, or a dark desert creature, or the king of death in the grave. He's also given many titles.
I think that people need to recognize these symbols as anthropomorphized ideas. Okay? Anthropomorphized ideas. But go ahead, let's continue.
Like tempter, or the evil one, or the devil, which in Greek means the slanderer.
But his name is Satan, right?
Actually, no. Satan is not a name. It's
Satanas.
Another one of these titles, which is why in Hebrew it has the word the in front of it. The Satan means the adversary, because he isn't for anything, rather he's anti-everything, working through lies to drag us back into darkness and disorder.
That's intense. Now, what about these other spiritual rebels in the Bible called demons? What are they all about?
Okay, so remember the concept of God's heavenly staff team, the divine council, or the sons of God. In the Hebrew scriptures, we're told that some of these rebelled too.
When did that happen?
Multiple times, actually. After the snake comes the rebellion of the sons of God in Genesis 6. We're told that they have sex with women who then give birth to violent warrior giants.
Oh, right. The Nephilim. These are probably the strangest characters in the whole Bible.
They don't talk about this in the New King James Version Bible. All right, this is a book that is not brought into play in the New King James Version Bible. This is the Book of Enoch that they're referencing, okay? Look up the Book of Enoch.
Strange from your point of view, but ancient readers knew exactly what was going on. The ancient kingdoms around Israel claimed to be founded and protected by giant warrior kings who were part human, part God, and filled with divine wisdom.
Ah, I see. So the biblical authors are saying, hey, those warrior kings, they shouldn't be honored.
Right. In this story, they're portrayed as human rebels who are captive to spiritual evil, spreading their violence in God's good world.
Yeah, and one of those kings in Genesis 10 goes on to build the city of Babylon.
Yes, Nimrod,
The city
whose name
of
sounds
Babylon,
like the Hebrew.
Nimrod. As a matter of fact, every December 25th, we are honoring Nimrod. Believe it or not, Nimrod dies on December 25th and was buried in the ground, and where Nimrod was buried, an evergreen tree sprouted. That's why for Christmas, we all put up a fucking tree that looks like the evergreen tree. And what did the people do when the evergreen tree grew from Nimrod's death burial area? They decorated it with gold and silver.
Word for rebel. And his kingdom leads to the next rebellion, where humans exalt themselves in Babylon.
But God scatters that rebellion.
And when Moses in Deuteronomy looks back at that story, he says that's the moment when God handed over the nations to worship the rebel host of heaven, the gods of money, sex, and military power. Moses is the first one to call them demons, that is, lesser spiritual beings.
So demons are spiritual forces at work behind corrupt human power structures.
Yes, but in
That
the Bible
is
they
correct.
also work on the personal level, animating and exploiting humanity's greed and selfishness,
That
as well
is
as
correct. Now, how demons can enter your soul is by you allowing them to go in there. And that's why a lot of people that are satanic and a lot of people that are look, believe it or not, the elites that are satanic, that are evil, they think that they have power over us regular folk. The elites believe, because they're satanic and because they have been brought up to believe in this philosophy, they believe that because they can sit firsthand and witness the most grotesque human atrocities and continue to eat and continue to just not be bothered by the grotesque images, like, seeing a baby, mutilated or chopped up or in pain. These elites believe that because that doesn't affect them emotionally and it doesn't affect them at all, that they have a power over the rest of humanity. Now, how these people are able to withstand seeing such devastation and seeing such torture and death is they allow entities to enter their body to give them the I don't know if you want to call it strength, but to give them the power to be able to not only withstand seeing grotesque human destruction, but getting off on it. People that get off on seeing people being dismembered, murdered, tortured, etc.
weakness of our mortal bodies. In the Bible, spiritual evil is at work in anything that drags God's good creation back into chaos, darkness, and death.
So this is why when Jesus arrives
Now,
on
the New World Order, okay? Their philosophy, or the globalists, their philosophy is order out of chaos. Okay? Order out of chaos. And that's how they control. Because when there's chaos, there's opportunity. And if you're in control of most things, you can control the chaos. And in controlling the chaos, you control the fear. And if you control the fear, you control the people.
the scene, he said his primary enemy is not human.
Right. Jesus and his first followers viewed all the pain and suffering in God's good world as a sign of its captivity to death and spiritual evil.
But they didn't think this was the end of the story.
Right. Jesus knew that the only way out of this cosmic ruin is to overcome evil and death itself, even if it costs him everything.
And you see, this is why, this is the credits. This is why, even if you're an atheist, even if you're a Satanist, even if you're a Semitic Jew or somebody who's Arab, that's why so many people hate Jesus. If Jesus wasn't real and Jesus was fictitious, Why is there so much effort and energy in trying to discredit and deface Jesus? And nobody can answer that question. You know, I want to be honest with you. No one can answer that question. And I look at that and say, well, obviously, if no one can answer why it is that everybody hates Jesus, and why Muslims during the ISIS tenure, during Obama's administration, were killing Christians in the Middle East, why is it that they hate Christians? Because there's got to be something to it. All right? Well, I think you need to read a little bit more about Satanas, Satan, because he is the prince of darkness. Now, why is it that these Satanists are so enthralled with darkness? Because believe it or not, okay, the power is in darkness. And the reason I say that, folks, is because whenever you clear your mind, when you're trying to create or innovate or come up with new ideas, what is the first thing that you do? You close your eyes. You close your eyes and embrace the darkness and embrace the nothingness. And when you embrace the darkness and nothingness, that's when nothingness turns into something. It turns into a thought. It turns into an idea. It turns into light. And that's why our forefathers were the Enlightenment era. Because they, instead of worshiping the darkness, worshiped the light. They worshiped the creation that was created out of darkness and created the light that we now see. And I would like to remind each and every one of you that light itself is what creates our visual perspective.